It's always a home run, and everybody loves the interactive dialogue that we get to have with John. And John's just a great teacher, a great author. He's got so many beautiful books out on just personal mastery, leadership mastery. He's really gifted in the area of leadership improvement. He's been in this mode of leadership for so long, just like I have been in this mode of sales and high trust for so long, that it ends up being conversations about wisdom, right? So we're going to get started. Scott, let me know if we get the YouTube stream fired up and we can get ready to go. If you are joining us, let's go into chat and oh, look at the title. I love it. And let's go into chat and just tell everybody where you're from. I'm in beautiful Las Vegas today, where it's finally cooling off. And we'll get that started. John, good to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us again this is your fourth Leadership Live conversation, and it's always so fun to dialogue with you. You have not only a heart to help people win and win at scale, but you have this amazing clarity. I oftentimes walk away from time with you thinking about just how magnificent your brain is. Our brains are all magnificent, right? But the way that you're able to teach and the way that you're able to share is always so inspiring. And so I'm grateful that we get to have this time together. Whether you're joining us live on the platform, welcome. Whether you are listening to us and viewing us on YouTube live as we stream, or whether you're watching a replay of this conversation, what a great title. What does it really take to lead with wisdom? So as we build this up and as we get going, our goal in Leadership Live is to speak to the leaders in the Fuel community that are wanting to make a profound, indelible, life-changing impact on their teams, right? The individual on a team, the group that is the team, the multiple groups that are the team. Wisdom is going to be a very, very important distinction. So I want to say something just about like a personal story. This idea of wise, right? This idea of wisdom comes from a couple different things in my mind, and we'll lead into John here in just a second. But wisdom oftentimes is when one finally realizes that the path they're on is not a path that's going to work out. It could be an action they're trying to take. It could be a larger scale strategic plan. It could be, try again. And somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, how important is tenacity in success? And I said, tenacity is really important in success as long as what you're tenacious about is not the repeated mistake that isn't getting you anywhere. That's one of the things that leads to wisdom, right? Personal experience. The other thing that leads to wisdom is the study and learning from others and then the teaching of that. One of the things I want to share with everybody as you continue to experience Fuel and what we're doing here to equip people for their happier, healthier, better performance kind of life is the idea that when we stop and we think about mentoring and we stop and we think about learning from others, we begin to understand that we can avoid some of the mistakes that we would otherwise make. And that's part of the power of having John Murphy with us today, and learn from others' mistakes. It's a very, very powerful thing. But on this tenacity thing, what I said is tenacity is great as long as you don't keep doing the wrong thing. You could be tenacious at the wrong thing, or you could be tenacious at the right thing. And that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of what does it really take to lead with wisdom. So John, welcome. Leadership Live number 4. Always good to have you with us, and always great to see what you're doing in the world. You've got something just that I think is very special to the Fuel audience. And so when we jump into this, I guess the first question should be, what does it really take to lead with wisdom? And then we've got some dialogue points we want to put in there. If you guys are interested in asking John a question, just put it in the chat. I'll dump some stuff in there that I think are pearls of wisdom as John and I have the conversation. But John, welcome to Leadership Live. And how would you answer that question since you are our co-host today? What does it really take to lead with wisdom?
All right, thanks, Todd, and welcome everybody. I'm in Palm Beach, Florida, and just loving it here on the East Coast. So, yeah, what does it take? Todd, you've heard me say this many times before. Number one, you got to get out of your own way. And that means being humble. and
Oh,
open and empathetic and seeking to understand. So often we think we know it, and we end up being tenacious about the wrong thing, Todd, to use your phrase. I love a quote from E.F. Shoemaker. And Shoemaker once said that any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to go in the opposite direction. What I've discovered is that wisdom is often going in the opposite direction. It's deleting when people think they need to add. And that's one of the most common things. Todd, I teach lean and operational excellence. And so often we just add and complicate. It's human nature. So I refer to something as the closet space syndrome. And the closet space syndrome is where we just keep filling up our closets and then we think we need more closets or bigger closets. And the reality is there's so much junk in our lives. We do the same thing with time. We fill up our time and then we hear things like we don't have time. There's just not enough time. I'm overwhelmed. And that's not wise. Wisdom is realizing there's 24 hours in a day, and it's been that way for a while.
oh,
And so
wow.
your use of time is what really matters. So, one of the first things I do to help organizations gain more wisdom, which comes from experience. You don't learn wisdom in a schoolroom, classroom.
Oh, no.
And it starts with let's get the facts, because frequently we're chasing the wrong thing tenaciously without any reasonable understanding of the facts. So I go in and we pull teams together. Todd, I run a lot of Kaizen events,
Yeah.
rapid change events. I've been doing that for 30 years all over the world. And I have no authority as a consultant. I go in, I have no positional authority. I can't make anybody do anything. Yet I get amazing transformational changes done, and I do it without any authority at all. So how does that happen? Well, I pull a team together of credible people because credibility is huge. And we influence senior leadership. We basically implement bottom up. We need senior leadership to deploy effectively top down, meaning support us
Yeah.
and help strategically guide us. But they're not going to make the changes at the front line. They don't know how. So we pull teams together, and what do we start with? Facts. You've heard me, that's one of my courses at Fuel. Prove it. You got a problem? Prove it. Show me the data. Because a lot of people are chasing problems that just don't exist, or they think there's a problem without understanding that it's a solution in disguise. So they're not looking at it effectively. So leading with wisdom is getting grounded in reality and then getting creative and innovative with options. So one of my bosses is very Socratic, and I love the Socratic approach, which is pulling versus pushing. He used to say to me, John, don't come to me with a problem. And most of us we think we know this, the second part of this, without a solution. That's not what Jean-Pierre Serrat said. He said, John, don't come to me with a problem without at least 3 solutions. I'm like, what? Man, I got this great ideas. Nope. I want to see 3. And so I use this, I call it the third right answer. And what we discover in these team events, these Kaizens, is that rather than being in a dualistic ego, us, them, right, wrong, option A, option B conflict, by exploring option C, that third option, what option we usually go with, A, B, or C? And the answer is none of them. None of them. Because in that process of exploration, we come up with an even better idea.
Right.
And then when we present this to senior management to get rapid change done, I'm talking about policy change done within a week, procedural change, huge changes, the deletion of a significant amount of non-value added activity, all within a week. One of the things I teach these black belts and these team members is that we have to be careful of another syndrome I call the ugly baby syndrome. You do not want to tell your senior leadership they have an ugly baby. Translation, an ugly department, an ugly process, because now you get pushback. So what we say is we are sort of like reporting live from Las Vegas here are the facts about this process. We take 180 days to do something that shouldn't take more than 20. Okay, we have 50 touch points that shouldn't be more than 5.
Right.
And these are facts. And what I say to the senior leadership, if you disagree with anything the team says, you have to prove them wrong with facts.
So let's stop on that for a second, because that's the tension, the healthy tension between push and pull and multiple solutions. I'm reminded what Peter Drucker said once, that there's nothing worse than doing something efficiently that should not be done at all. And so, gosh, even just recently this week, Alex and I were talking to a potential client for fuel, and we had a video that Alex found about a senior leader who was presenting to a group, and he had a volunteer come up from the group and got him over to the side of a room, if you can visualize this, and then walked him just gently. They were side by side, walking to the other side of the room, and they counted the number of steps, and it was 7. So then the instructor said to the volunteer, divide 7 in 2. And the guy said 3.5. And so they turned around and just walked again together 3.5 steps, so that the contributor could be in the middle of the room. And so then the instructor said, turn around. And the instructor went to the other side of the room, came at the volunteer with his hands out. And the volunteer put his hands out. And then the leader, the instructor in the room, tried to push the person, and there was this no instinct, no rules, nothing was said, and boom, here we go, right? Oh,
yeah.
Alex just put this in chat. Let me see if I can share this real quick. Let's see. Sharing's not turned on. Scott, give me sharing real quick. I think everybody's going to love watching this for just a sec, John, and then I'll get your push commentary on this. All right, so here we go. Let me see if I can pop this up real quick. Let's see here. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Okay, so let me stop this.
Yeah, I do this all the time in demonstrations. You put your hand up and have somebody meet it. You push, you get pushed back. It's instinctive.
Okay, so I am going to share. Here we go, guys. Let me go ahead and make sure that everybody's got their listen on. And share sound. Let's see here. John, tell me if you hear the sound, because I've got everything pushed here. So let me just.
You have to click on mute in the corner.
I what?
Unmute.
Where is it?
And we're getting it.
Oh, there we go. I got it. Share sound. Okay, tell me if you guys can hear this.
Go up a little. Oh, it's on the video.
I can't see the, let's see here. There it is.
There you go.
You're starting left. Hold on. Stay right there.
Can you hear it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Here, come on, hands up.
Let me back it up. Let's see here.
Yep, you're watching it.
Okay. Go. First of all, let's give Mike a little bit of appreciation. Okay. Did I ever, stay right there, you're good. Did I ever explain the rules?
No.
This is interesting. When Mike was walking with me, did he ever resist?
No.
Not one time. He counted 7 paces. Then he counted 3.5. And he might have been thinking in his head, what am I doing? Why are we doing this?
That's true.
But he never resisted. Immediately, when I started pushing, what did he do? Did I tell him to?
No.
There's something magical when people feel like we are pushing, mentally or physically, they will, I don't even tell them, they will automatically what? Push back.
Yes.
So how am I building the confidence, the competence, and the comfort for people to understand that we're actually trying to what? Walk together versus me feeling like I'm forcing and always, come here for a second, Mike.
Good.
Look at that. See that? See what you said? Let's give Mike a appreciation.
Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. So John, push pull. Talk about it.
Well, it's important to realize that, it isn't just a physical demonstration like that. I'm getting an echo. Are you guys hearing that?
Yeah, let me just.
I think it's your sharing your audio.
Okay, how's that?
Let's try that. Yep, that's a lot better.
Good.
Actually, now I'm getting an echo again.
How's that? Good, 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 good.
All right. So think about it this way. There's the physical demonstration, which we just observed, but think about a conversation. What's pushing? The answer is statements, judgments. What's pulling? Questioning. If you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, there's the P and the J, the perceiving and judgment component of our personalities. I'm a Myers-Briggs instructor. What is the P, the perceiving? It's opening the mind to intake. We perceive when we open the refrigerator and try to figure out what do we want, or the closet, what are we going to wear? That's perceiving. Judgments, concluding, well, I'm going to wear this or I'm going to eat this. And when we have a conversation with somebody, we're pulling when we're inviting them to speak, when we're listening, when we're perceiving and intaking. A lot of leaders are not very good at this. They don't know how to listen well. They don't know how to empathize and get underneath the skin, so to speak, of the people they're leading, which is a form of push or closure. So one of the things Isabel Myers said many years ago, and I love this statement she said, is when working with others, use perception and keep J to yourself. Perceive with others, keep judgment to yourself. What does that mean? It means judgment is taking responsibility. It's getting things done. It's being organized. That's just a component of our personalities. And like being right or left-handed, we have both perception and judgment. One dominates, but it's helpful to know as part of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, what dominates in my life? Am I more pushy just by nature, or am I more open and questioning? And learning to balance that, because it's obviously important that we use both every day of our lives.
So what is the Socratic approach? So when we understand this, the goal of leadership is to connect with your follower and connect in a way that is moving, meaningful, non-judgmental, non-shameful, in a way that inspires them to respond in a positive way to the quote constructive but more helpful feedback, right? So walk us through the art of questioning, because the perception can only happen through the question, and discuss this Socratic method that I think a lot of people probably haven't even really heard of. I know what it is, but what's your take on that angle?
Yeah, well, it's based on one of the greatest teachers in history, Socrates. And the Socratic method essentially means you question everything. You act as though you know nothing. And because there's very little that we actually know with any real certainty. The ego thinks we do, but beyond the ego is this whole world of unlimited potential. How in the world are we supposed to know that? So the Socratic method is very open. Whether you're parenting a child, instead of telling them what to do, you're asking them, what do you think is the right thing to do? As a leader in a business, instead of telling people in a dictatorial kind of way, do this, do that, you're inviting them to educate you. You're getting out of your own way. And if you don't have that psychological safety where people feel comfortable challenging you. So a simple Socratic method is to say to people, push back. Tell me why this idea is wrong. A tool I use in operational excellence a lot is the FMEA, the failure mode and effect analysis. What is that? It's asking what could go wrong. So if I'm going to make a decision, I could ask my staff, what could go wrong with this? And let's make sure we mitigate any of that risk. So it's opening, it's asking questions, it's listening with empathy to really try to understand. I'll give you one quick story, Todd, because this is back 37 years ago when I was getting started, and I gave my first public presentation at a local university, and I asked somebody who worked for the university to sit in and give me feedback, and I gave a half a day workshop, and at the end of the workshop, I asked her, I said, what do you think? She said, do you want the truth? That might sting a little bit. And here's the thing, I got two clients out of that workshop. One was a bank offering to loan me money. I was just getting started in business and certainly could use that. I had evaluation forms that went out. I got wonderful scores. I could have easily said to her, Well, I disagree. I did a great job. Look at the evidence. But she gave me some of the best tips ever. And for the last 37 years, I've used these experiential learning methods. She recommended I take a course in experiential learning, the Socratic method to learning, which is bringing the learning to life. Okay. Confucius once said, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. So when I teach, I've created copywritten simulations. I've run these with the military. I've run it with companies all over the world, and they learn by failing because these simulations are designed initially to where you can't win. You cannot win without completely rethinking the system that you're in. You can't win. And so they have to really struggle. So you're creating an emotional impact. And by the third round of these simulations, they're high-fiving. They just, and I've gotten them so far out of the box, they can't believe it. So Socratic teaching is asking a lot of questions. And so a lot of times in a conversation with someone, you might think about, how do I end this conversation with a question? This sentence. So you say something to me, John, what about this or that? And I'll say, well, here are my initial thoughts, Todd. But here's something I'm concerned about. What do you think about this? And so you're inviting dialogue. You're not shutting it down. So that's a very Socratic approach to communication.
So here's what's interesting. Alex and I have done a lot of research on this, and the Aristotle Project, which, when you refer to the great minds of history that Google did, basically led to some really sincere breakthroughs. And I think that this is what we should all be about as leaders. We should be about, and I just put this in chat, psychological safety means team members feel safe to take risks, speak up with ideas, admit mistakes, and ask questions without fear of being shamed, punished, or humiliated. And what we're talking about is the kind of leadership that is not positional. If I understand this like I think I do, it is relational, right? It is about understanding that a team inspired that are surrounded by safety will create far more ideas than any team that doesn't feel like they have the space to do that. I think about the book I read 25 years ago called Father, Son, and Company. It was a story of IBM and Thomas Watson. And you may have heard this story, John. And if you did, yeah, that, I guess an engineer made a huge mistake early on and it cost IBM millions of dollars. And the engineer goes to Thomas Watson with his resignation letter. And Thomas Watson looks at him and says, I'm not going to accept your resignation. Okay, I've just invested a couple $1,000,000 in you, and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
We just figured out how not to do it, even though you made a mistake. And I think that's kind of the idea here, right? If we want our teams to really stand up and step up and go for it, they need to feel safe. And so that then begs the culture that we're creating, right? And Fuel's about performance culture, right? Performance as a culture. What are some of the things you've seen as you look at Kaizen, as you look at going in? And I was intrigued by cutting things out to amplify impact, right? I was intrigued by how engaged one of the other studies, and you probably know this, but the percentage of employees that are actually engaged in the vision of the company still is just low. It's just like unacceptably low. And I'm trying to figure out why, in decades of it being low, why doesn't it improve? And I think that teams got to love winning. They got to love learning how not to do it. They got to have a culture of safety and go for it. And so what is your take on all this? Because I think everybody would agree, at least I believe this, if we asked for a show of hands, everybody could agree that they could be better as questioners, as creating safety zones, right? But what's the practical application of this? What can somebody watching this right now go out and do to begin to deploy tactically?
So yeah, well, I'm a change master, a change agent. When I go in to lead change quickly, one of the things we're doing is we're demonstrating a new culture in an old one. And the old culture being we take weeks and weeks and weeks of meetings every week, and there's a lot of back and forth to get simple changes made to improve a process or a change of policy or adopt a new policy, weeks and weeks, months and months. We do it in a week. And that blows people's minds because we're demonstrating a different way to do things, which is culture. Culture is the way we do things around here. It's just the way we do things, whether it's in a household or a department or a business. So we change the way we do things by changing the way we do things. And that builds massive impact and credibility because all of a sudden you're getting immediate results that you didn't get before. Building credibility builds influence. As far as mistakes go, we don't want to make foolish mistakes, but I remember Tom Peters, you remember Tom Peters, used to say, we need to make our mistakes faster. Why? Because that's how we learn and that's how we gain wisdom. We gain wisdom from mistakes, but we don't want to make stupid mistakes. So one of the things we use is that failure mode and effect analysis, where we identify everything that could go wrong with the changes we want to make. We list it, and then we find ways to mitigate it or eliminate it. Okay, countermeasures, if you will. We also do this. We capture the cost of doing nothing, what we call CODN. What's the cost of not making the change? So to boost credibility, we've got the risk of doing it to compare with the risk of not doing it. And 99 times out of 100, the risk of not doing it's bigger, it's worse. So we don't get resistance to change because it's stupid to resist something that's worse. So the other key thing, Todd, is that we have to get alignment. I will always say to a team, we're not going to present anything to the senior leadership if anyone on this team disagrees. If anyone on this team disagrees, we're not aligned. And we have to figure out why we aren't aligned, because when we present, the leadership's we're going to have a collective credibility. So it isn't just Murphy or a few people on the team. When the entire team of smart people who've been appointed to this Kaizen, the entire team is saying, we need to do this. We're foolish not to. How is anybody going to say no to that and not look like a blockhead?
Right.
So that's a wise approach to gain acceptance, approval, and beyond that, enthusiasm for the change. And I can't tell you how many times I've had senior leadership come to these Kaizen events and just go, this is mind-blowing. We've demonstrated a different culture, which people say it takes years to actually change culture. It's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But you got to know how to do it. And here's another little trick of the trade, Todd, that I use is I tell the team, you don't have to trust me. You don't even know me. Okay, you don't have to trust me, but I'm going to ask you to trust the process because we're using a global best practice. It's been used all over the world by leading companies, by government agencies, military units. You don't have to trust me, but trust the process. And I'll tell you one quick story about that. I was doing a Kaizen event in the Department of Defense in Washington, and this was a pretty big deal. And I had one literal rocket scientist. This happened to do with the nuclear weaponry. And literally, he said, there's just no way we're going to get this done in a week. It's impossible. You don't understand. Murphy, you don't understand. I go, all right, well, you don't have to be on the team. Oh, yes, I do. I've been told I have to be here. So using a little Socratic approach and using a little pull, I said, well, first of all, you don't have to be on the team, and I can go talk to the admiral who's commissioned this and have you pulled off. Do you really want to leave the team? There's the question. Well, I don't know. Long story short, Tuesday, he's just as bad. He's disruptive on the team. Wednesday, he starts to soften. But here's what's softening him: facts and data, and all of a sudden optimism. Like, wow, we could make some real changes by Friday. And on Thursday, we had policy changes signed by the admiral. This guy came up to me at the end of the week, gave me a hug, and said, "John, you made a believer out of me. I just can't believe that we got this done." So dealing with resistance in a Socratic way and getting people to trust the process, not just you. Todd, I don't expect people to trust me if they haven't even met me. Maybe they're aware of my reputation and I've done a lot of these things. And so we should give this guy a chance. But believe it or not, there are a lot of people that are very defensive because they got ugly babies. And I mean, we're not going to tell them they have an ugly baby, but we're going to say, look at the facts. And when the facts are going to tell them, your department's a mess. Okay. And you gave some interesting statistics earlier about how businesses think they're doing a lot better than customers actually think they are.
Right.
That's something I call perception warp, when what I think you think is different than what you really think. And there's perception warp all over the place. So when I talk about getting facts and creating a very compelling story about the way things are currently getting done, the way we do things around here, cultural, and the way we change that is by changing the systems and the structures and the policies that we use, because that's also the way we do things around here. So culture isn't this mysterious, behavioral, we got to go to a psychotherapist to get everybody's changed and motivated. No, we change the way they do things around here in terms of procedures and policies and systems. And all of a sudden, if we delete, to go back to Shoemaker's intelligent fool thing, we eliminate a lot of blockage. We eliminated a lot of back and forth, redundant, stupid activity, stupid meetings that people sit in. We get rid of that stuff, we remove it, and we get tremendous flow.
So the metaphor here, and it's interesting when you hear it for the first time. But what I hear you saying is that without what we're talking about, most companies and therefore then their teams end up in a state of what is referred to as organizational constipation, where it's just not flowing. You just used the word flowing. If we took this to the street, and maybe there's a leader watching this right now, the whole idea of wisdom, influence, pull versus push, the questioning process, everything can be improved. Somebody's watching, they have 10 people on their team. Somebody's watching and they have 1,000 people on their team. What do you say to the person that has 10 people on their team right now that wants more flow, that doesn't want to do things that are unnecessary, that wants to create a culture of improvement, constant, right? I mean, that isn't that what Kaizen is, constant and never-ending improvement? What do you say to that person right now? What's a tactical takeaway that in the next 3 or 4 days, the small team leader can begin to use on this whole front of wisdom and influence and flow?
Well, you've got to get alignment. You can't get alignment without focus, without a clear mission. And the problem is a lot of people have their own personal clear, like, this is my job, this is what I'm getting paid for, and no connection whatsoever with the end user customer who pays for whatever it is you're doing. So lean and the way we run Kaizen events, Kaizen essentially is two words, Japanese put into one. Kai, K-A-I, means to take apart and make new. And Zen is all about harmony and balance and flow and, peace. So Kaizen is to take a dysfunctional, constipated process apart, put it back together again in a streamlined, user-friendly, almost effortless way. So, and the Kaizen event is where you do that in a week. So, what would I tell my team of 10 or 1,000 is what's our reason for being here?
Yeah.
Okay, because every business is about giving. Every human being on the planet should be thinking about giving. What do I give and for what reason? So as a team, what are we getting paid for by the external customer? Some people say, well, I'm getting paid by the boss. I'm getting paid by the company. No, what's the company getting paid for? So lean works backwards. It starts with what we call the big C, the capital C customers, the end user, period. MIT defined it that way a long time ago. So in a hospital situation, it's the patient. It's not the doctors and the pharmacists and all the in-between people. It's the patient who takes the pill or gets the surgery done. It's the driver of the car. Okay. So if you're in the tire business, it's not General Motors or Ford or Toyota. It's the person who drives the car with your tires on it. So anyway, so what's the big C paying us for? And then how what we do, how does it impact that? And in lean terms, you find all kinds of what's called non-value added activity in a business. There's no value whatsoever. So we have to figure out a way to delete that. You could ask your staff, what could we stop doing right now to make things better? Not add, So I'd start with that question. What could we stop doing? And somebody, if they feel psychologically safe, says, I think we should get rid of this stupid meeting we have every Tuesday. It's all it's doing is it's not doing anything.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Or I think we need to eliminate this form that we have to fill out for some whatever reason. And I did a Kaizen event one time for a major corporation, and we had 100 different forms taped to the wall that this tax department had to use. And by the end of the Kaizen event, we had like 20. We got rid of 80 different forms and reports that had to be done in a week because they were nonsense. But think about all the time that took for people to fill that stuff out. And a lot of these reports people didn't even read.
So let me jump on this because I just put in the chat. We most often, I believe, have to deconstruct before we reconstruct, right? And when we listen to what you say about non-value added activities, and we look at how constipation in an organization develops. Bob Kriegel talks about it as the purple cow, which is the standards or the sacred policies or these types of things that have gotten the company to where the company is. But if we don't have this idea of clean it up to take it up, remove first, and then rebuild, right? In high trust selling, there's a law called the law of the broom. And the law of the broom says clean it up before you take it up. And people, if they don't clean it up and they try to take it up, they're actually slowing down progress. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So then the art of leaning out is not how much you do. It's not about how many hours the team works. It's about the productivity of each of those hours by doing less that doesn't matter, that
Mhm.
is obsolete, that probably doesn't have even as much contribution to the financial output, even though it may still be necessary, but it could be integrated or removed. And lean the whole thing out so we operate with speed, we operate with velocity. We're not bogged down by ancient policies, right? And that's the culture of performance. That's what constant and never-ending improvement means. And when we talk about one of my courses on the 5-year refutable principles of success. Principle number one is everything can be improved. And the reason why it's irrefutable is there's not one person listening to this, watching this, or even considering what we're talking about that would not agree that that is true. Right.
Mhm.
And it's not a setup for failure. It's a revelation of clarity and transparency and authenticity that's never going to change. That's
Yeah.
never changed. I did some research yesterday. The fax machine was invented in 1863. I had no idea. And the fax machine is still used by doctors today. It's necessary for some businesses, unnecessary for others. But the fact, did you know, John, that that was invented in the mid 1800s? How does that even happen, right? And you can see all the
Yeah.
pictures. But my point to all of that is um, everything is changing, right? You're a
Mhm.
change mastery expert. You have a podcast on that. What are two or the three things in change mastery that you really believe, besides what we've talked about, but really are the kind of the icing on the cake of this conversation we're having? That I mean, we have a T-shirt at Fuel that says "One change changes everything." And, it's built on the philosophy that nothing changes until something changes. So you're an
Yes.
expert in that area. How do you take the wisdom piece that we've talked about today, add on to that the change mastery piece? Because I think everybody would agree that you cannot stop in today's world. You can rest
Yeah.
and then attack, but we got to be never ending improvement, not like every
Sure.
21 days.
Well, my tagline for the Change Mastery Show is "Be the change." It's obviously from Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world, uh, but be the change, be the peace you want to see in the world. Be the joy, be the love, be it. Don't become it. Don't think it's got to happen someday in the future. We live in the now, so be it now. So we change culture now. We don't think, well, next quarter, next year we'll finally get there because you never will. So we be the change. That's on a personal level. Be the leader that you want to see in the world. Be the sage leader, the wise leader. The next thing I would make sure that people think about is what can you stop doing? Get away from the ad mentality and think about what can I delete? There's a term in Japan called muda, M-U-D-A. Muda is waste. And Taishi Ono, the legendary chief engineer at Toyota years ago, came up with the 7 types of waste. So 7 different types of waste. And some of are very invisible. So for example, the 7 real quickly, one is correction. If we have errors and we have to do something over again, that's wasteful, right? Another one's overproduction, which means we're doing more than we have to. We're building up piles of inventory because someday we'll sell it. That's not how Amazon works or Walmart. They get paid before they have to pay for what they just sold you. That's flow. Inventory flow. Inventory is another one of the 7 ways, translates into cash flow. Motion, all kinds of motion is one of the 7 ways. Just you watch all this motion. Shouldn't be that. Yeah, it's like busyness. Movement is the product that you're actually selling. So to make a vitamin tablet, one of my clients years ago, now they never knew this, but we measured how far does the material go from in the door to out the door. You know what the answer was? 14.2 miles. Back and forth, in and out of inventory, which is one of the 7 wastes. The inventory was turning twice a year, 180 days. That's $300 million stuffed in a mattress in this particular plant. $300 million not moving. That's constipation, to use your word. Waiting. So waiting is one of the 7 wastes. Waiting means waiting for approvals on reports, waiting in meetings, waiting for things to start. From a physical standpoint, it's the product that you're selling to the end user customer that's waiting somewhere in inventory. And then excess processing is the 7th waste. It's doing 10 things when you really only need to do 1. It's a lot of busy work, excessive processing. So correction, overproduction, motion, movement, waiting, inventory, and processing, excess processing are those infinite 7 wastes, the muda. So here's a quick illustration. If I have a 10-step process and it takes me 1 minute to do each of the 10 steps. So in terms of actual value work, it takes 10 minutes of actual work. Guess how long it often takes? 10 days. Okay, it's not even close. So here's the trick. We can be efficient in these steps, which is where people look. Oh, look how efficient our department is. And the value stream is completely inefficient. So the customer's like, where's my stuff? And everybody's like, well, we can't work any faster. And now we're bringing in robots to do it even faster when we shouldn't be doing it at all.
Right.
Or we should be looking at the gaps. We call it the white space on a process map. You've got activity, and in between you have white space. Nothing's going on. That's where the real opportunity is to figure out how do we eliminate that waiting. And if you look behind the curtain at companies like Amazon, there's practically no waiting. The flow and the coordination, it's like an orchestra. Everybody's got their part, but they're united, they're aligned. Their mission is very clear, and it's very much about the big C customer, you and me, who buy the stuff, right? And use it. And it's eliminated all kinds of that in-between nonsense. Of course, it's disruptive. But I'll use the example of like a Walmart. You go to a Walmart and you buy something and they scan it. And, okay, it's been in inventory for 2 days and they haven't paid for it yet. It's like a multi-billion-dollar consignment shop. And then they move to something called vendor managed inventory control, where it's essentially the stores are real estate and you get a space in the store to sell your stuff and you manage it. They don't order anything. So those are paradigm shifting strategies that are wise. And so of course it's wise to know what your competition's doing, and it's wise to think about what the market really wants and doesn't want. It's wise to measure your metrics, like you said earlier. There's the business thinks they're doing 75% great, and the customer's saying no, it's more like 20. You know, those perception warps, those gaps. So, wisdom to me, it's a form of awareness. It's a form of awakening. So what I do is I go into organizations and with facts and data, incredible teams who are aligned and united, and we influence massive change without any authority. We're making change up, and that's change mastery. That's not change management.
Right, right. I want to go off on a word you just used. I was doing some study and watching some things. And one of the things that hit me was a interview with Deepak Chopra, and he was talking about the power of awareness, right? And you just used that word. And I think that for me, many people walk through the day without that laser awareness feature, right? It's like part of what we're talking about here, the pathway to wisdom has got to include awareness, I would imagine. You have so much skill in this mindset stuff, this heart stuff, the inner soul stuff. Can you just, as an impromptu, go off on awareness and just talk to these leaders about how important it is to be aware, just to be aware.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because that's one of the things by the way, I encourage these teams to be very creative in the way they express data and that they tell the story. Give you a quick example. I was working with a hospital system, and there was primary hospital and secondary hospital. So, the primary is where you get the immediate care done, and if you need therapy and rehab, you go into a secondary hospital. Same hospital system, completely dysfunctional to the point where people were in the hallways in the primary care hospital, on gurneys and whatnot, waiting to get a room. Empty beds in secondary, people in primary who qualify for secondary but wouldn't get. So it was like no air traffic control. You could imagine all the crashes we'd have if there wasn't some kind of a governing system. So we modeled a solution in 1 week after air traffic control, and using another Japanese methodology called Kanban. Kanban essentially means signal, but it's a pull system. So when an empty bed opens up in secondary, we pull in a primary. It pulls. Another example of a Socratic, approach. We're literally pulling patients through and balancing. Balance is a huge part of all of this, balancing the system. But to get the senior leadership to feel it, we actually set up a simulation. We had them come in, and the CEO was a patient case study. This was a real case study. And she had to sit in a chair, which was a pretend gurney, in the primary care hospital, sit there while the system finally got cleared and she finally came through. And then we put data with that so she could realize, I had to sit there for 2 days, or whatever the period of time was. And then I finally got moved. And so the point is they felt the pain of the current state, the current culture, the current way we do things. It wasn't just a report or data on a spreadsheet. They felt it. And so we find ways to get senior leadership to really feel it. One day, this was in a pharmaceutical company. I got the C-suite to actually walk the value stream like they were a tablet. And here's and we condensed 180 days from in the door to out the door down to a 1 hour walk. Wow. And we stood in raw material inventory for 22 minutes without moving. And they felt the pain. Like, are we ever going to get out of here? Right? And by the time we got to the first value-added activity, which was compounding this, powder into a mix, that took like 30 seconds relative to the hour.
Right.
And guess where we went next? Back to a warehouse and stood there for 8 more minutes. And then we went to a lab. And by the end of the hour, they were fuming, basically. But I never called their baby ugly. Nobody did. But they discovered this is one nasty process. Fix it. And we did it fast.
So what a great story. I mean, speed, the speed of execution today and intelligent speed so that we don't make unnecessary mistakes to one of the themes of our time here together today. The idea I mean, as a writer, you'll appreciate this, but Deb and I have a term that we use. It's kind of like the ugly baby, but when you're writing books, at least for me, part of the hard part is what not to put in the book. And even though it's fabrically part of the story, or it might be part of the DNA of what you're trying to do, the hardest part is what we call drowning puppies, right? Which is how do you say no to the thing that you know is part of, but not essential. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. I think that most of the time today, we've used ugly baby as a team. Talk a little bit about the power of wisdom, and I think that it's pretty obvious, but on a team, you could have an ugly baby. You could have somebody on the team that's getting in the way. I think John Maxwell calls it the law of the weak link or something like that. Um, at Fuel, we believe you move them up, move them out, you reposition or replace somebody, and replace is not to get rid of them necessarily. Replace might be to right fit them into the organization. But the other idea is oftentimes we hang on to people too long, whether it's positional hang on and they're better off somewhere else in the company, or it is employment hang on and whatever is triggering up here to keep people longer than necessary. What is your sense on that as you talk to leaders about change and the idea that influence is influence and the idea that connection is important? We can't connect with an individual. We can't collaborate with an individual we haven't connected, which is part of Socratic. What do you have to
Yeah.
say
So,
about?
yeah. So, by the very first book I wrote, Pulling Together the Power of Teamwork, 30 plus years ago, I listed 17 principles, and the 17th was pull the weeds. Pull the weeds means let's remove the obstacles, right? If we've got people that just cannot get on board, they just won't align with the mission for whatever their reasons, we got to get them out of the way. Because if we don't, they become the problem. We have a problem to solve, and it's not George, or Sally. The problem is the mission. So, and like my example earlier with the Department of Defense, the guy I had to confront, it's tempting to think he was a weed, but he was
Right.
a highly intelligent person who just didn't believe what we were going to get done, that it was possible. So he wasn't resisting because he just was a jerk. He just didn't believe. And so that's where I think real wise leadership comes in, where how do you get people who don't believe to believe? That's masterful in terms of change. So how do I get these people on board? We seek to understand the resistance. So it's always about removing blockage and resistance. So we when people aren't on board, it's because there's a reason. And so using a Socratic approach, I got to find out why I'm getting this pushback. And if it's a psychologically safe environment, they'll tell me, John, I
Yeah.
just simply don't agree. I think we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. And so that's when we do a risk analysis, because that one person might actually have something very important to say. But there are people like in my second book, Agent of Change, Leading a Cultural Revolution. It was an allegory, and there was a plant manager in this story who just couldn't get on board. And so the protagonist had to make a decision. Either we're going to change our culture by me removing this person who happens to be a friend, or I ignore that and the culture just doesn't change the way it needs to. What am I going to do? And he had to pull the weed. He had to pull the weed, and that led to my third book, Reinvent Yourself, which is a story of the guy that got fired. And what you discover in that story is he hated his job in the first place.
Right, right.
So, like it's like you say, it's like a person in the wrong position.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah. Well, wrong position and not effective leadership connection to really make sure that there is this right fitting going on. And I think that as we kind of go to the top of the hour here, Renee had a great question here, and I'd be interested in this. Fellow instructor Renee Godefroy, he says, John, what's one thing a leader can actually kill in their own daily routine to free up massive time? And I'm going to let you answer it. I have one answer, and then we'll get everybody to the finish line.
Yeah, well, first thing that comes to mind, thanks, Renee, is I remember working with an executive in New York City, and he had a time management issue. And I said, well, let's do a little Pareto chart. I believe in using useful tools. How are you spending your time? He's like, well, I don't know. I'm always busy. Well, let's break it down into categories. And one of the categories was the emails and interruptions, people just interrupting him during the day in his office. So then I use a process I call Pareto the Pareto. Let's go deeper. So if you say interruptions, what kind of interruptions? Let's dig down so we could do a pie chart on the different types of interruptions, pie chart on the different types of emails that are coming in. And then a poka-yoke, which is a mistake proofing process. Poka-yoke is another one of these Japanese lean terms. We poka-yoke it, meaning how can I eliminate half the emails that are coming into me? How can I eliminate half the interruptions? Because apparently I'm the problem. Why are people coming to me? I call that dependency syndrome. People are delegating things, problems up to me. And they're interrupting me and they're sending me emails and they're asking for permissions and they're double checking and triple checking. They're obviously afraid. Why don't I come up with strategies to eliminate the need for them to do that? And we discover this in this particular case, this guy's like, oh my God, this is like amazing. Now, I just got half of my day freed up.
Right.
So
Right.
it's little strategies like that and so wisdom also means knowing what tools to use when you're solving problems. There's some fantastic management tools out there that people never even heard of. Poka-yoke, what's that? Kanban, pull, I don't get that. The seven ways, Muda, what? Now, a lot of these are Japanese words, but they're translated very easily into English. It doesn't matter what you call them. They're very useful tools. And like a plumber who's going to come in and, fix a leak in your faucet, they might have 50 tools in their truck. You're the customer. How many do you want them to use? And the answer is usually one, maybe two. I don't want them using all 50 tools. They're going to make a mess of things. So the plumber who's wise knows just what tool to use to get the job done when, fast and efficiently, at what price, a very fair and reasonable price. Basically, value in your eyes as a customer is I want it done a quality job. I want the service to be helpful and friendly. I don't want to pay an arm and a leg for the job. Pretty simple value components. And the wise service-oriented leader or plumber or whatever you want to use as a metaphor delivers.
Right.
They deliver. We deliver.
So I love that. We've gone to a point where these observations and illustrations, John, we started things off by you saying people say they don't have enough time, and we all know that sure you do. And the idea here is that you cannot really manage time itself because it's a static measurement. You cannot try to be a great time manager and somehow turn an hour into two. An hour is an hour, and 60 seconds, and 60 minutes are all part of that kind of combination, 84,000 for whatever, seconds a day. So I think the thing that I would like to leave people with is that the less busy you are in terms of quote juggling, right, and trying to get all this stuff done, there is a breakthrough when you start to realize that less is more. And I had an early deal where I wrote down my 10 customers and I wrote them down in order of my most important customer, the most business, to my least, even though they were still good. And then I was told to move those names over to the right side of the paper and now list those people in order of how much time I spent with them. And then the third instruction was to connect the same name on the left with the name on the right. And what I realized is the people at the bottom of my list that gave me the least amount of business, I was spending the most time with. And to get to the 80-20 rule, it was like two of the people you're not spending enough time with could give you 4 times the business if you got rid of the 8 or had a different management process with the 8. It was one of the most important breakthroughs that I've ever seen. And then I was reminded that Warren Buffett says no to 99% of the investment opportunities he's presented. And the art of saying no, the art of no in leadership is creating space to lead. And the art of no in sales is creating space to sell more. And the art of no in customer service is to make sure that you are saying the right things to the right people and in creating these tribes of raving and loyal fans. All of this is under the auspice of leadership and wisdom. John, really, really great. How do people follow up with you if they want more of you? We know we have a couple great courses on fuel that you need to go to, and you can even start to share some of. I love the creative problem solving course, and I love the Beyond Doubt course. You could take the creative problem solving course, and you can start to share this with your team every single week. You could have a team meeting, or you could have 3 a week. The lessons are, I don't know, 5 to 9 minutes long, and get your team thinking the same way John is teaching, and you could see some real change happening. Thank you, Renee. This is the most powerful conversation I've ever heard on leadership. Thank you, John. Awesome.
Thanks,
Pauline,
Renee.
yeah, yeah. So, John Murphy, how do people get a hold of you? We know they can come into the course and watch you and learn that, but how do they get a hold of you directly for additional product services and consulting?
Yeah, we could drop this into the chat. johnjmurphy.org is my website, johnjmurphy.org. Also easy to find on LinkedIn and Facebook. I have a YouTube channel with over 200 short video clips out on best practices, self-help type stuff. In the creative problem solving course, I actually do cover like tools like Pokeyoke and FMEA and a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. So that's, again, in those 6-minute courses or lessons, there's a lot there.
Awesome.
But yeah, by all means, I'd love to hear from people and help where I can.
It's always amazing to have combos with you. You're a wise thought leader, and thank you for your conversation today on wisdom. Thank you guys for joining Leadership Live. Again, I say this every single week. Share these links with your team. Invite other leaders that you hang out with. If you're mid-level in leadership, take this all the way up to your boss. Get the whole company involved in these conversations. Our thought leaders like John are here every single Wednesday to deliver leadership value to you, and we're just grateful that we get a chance to do that with you. They're grateful they get to have a play with us, and personally, I'm grateful I get to learn from all of our great instructors. Murphy, thanks so much. We'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great week. Join us for Mindful Monday next Monday, and we've got something new coming up featuring John that we'll announce in a couple of weeks. All right, guys, take care. Thanks, Scott, for the production effort on the back, and share these with your team as the replays become available on